You know that moment when you're at the supermarket, just grabbing your usual stuff, milk, eggs, maybe some pasta, and the total at the till makes your jaw drop.
Yeah.
It feels like the cost of just, well, existing is creeping higher and higher.
It really does.
Now, picture this flip side. While our grocery bills are ballooning, there's a segment of society where wealth isn't just growing, it's taking off like a rocket.
What's really striking is that divergence. We're all feeling the pinch with everyday expenses, particularly those non-negotiables. Yet simultaneously, we're witnessing an unprecedented surge in wealth at the very top. In this deep dive, we're going to unpack this widening gap,
Right.
the collision of rising living costs and, exploding billionaire fortunes. And we'll be drawing on some fascinating insights from roughly 2020 to 2025.
Exactly. We've sifted through analysis from the SideBySide podcast, which really brings home the personal impact of these trends.
Yeah, that was interesting.
We've also got a compelling report from Oxfam called Takers Not Makers, which delves into the kind of nuts and bolts of how this wealth is accumulating.
A really provocative title, that one.
Oh, and then there's a great data-rich YouTube breakdown from Cold Fusion that really puts the sheer scale of these numbers into perspective. Our goal today is to get under the hood of these seemingly opposite trends and, most importantly, understand what they mean for you in your daily life.
So let's tackle those rising grocery bills first.
Yeah.
Initially, the explanations felt pretty straightforward, right? The pandemic messed up supply chains globally.
Yeah, that was the first thing everyone said.
Fuel prices spiked, and we even saw labor shortages in certain sectors. These were tangible factors that, most of us could intuitively grasp.
Right. But here's where it gets really interesting. It turns out those initial disruptions, while significant, well, they don't tell the whole story. Our sources point to a substantial role played by corporate profits. It appears that many large companies, especially in the food and retail industries, didn't just navigate the disruptions. They used that period to actually widen their profit margins.
Right, and this raises a crucial question. When you're paying more for your groceries, how much of that extra money is actually going towards increased costs for the companies?
Yeah.
And how much is ending up as profit?
Yeah.
For the corporations and their shareholders?
Exactly.
The information we've looked at suggests it's a significant portion. It's not simply the raw cost of ingredients or transportation going up.
Okay.
Interestingly, while initial reports focused on supply chain issues causing, say, maybe a 5% price increase, our analysis of the Oxfam and SideBySide data suggests that corporate profit-taking added another 3-5% on top of that.
Wow, so doubling it in some cases.
Essentially doubling the impact on consumers in some sectors, yeah.
Yeah.
This wasn't just about covering costs, it was about expanding margins during a crisis.
Okay, so while our grocery spending is up, let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Between, 2020 and 2024. The wealth held by billionaires didn't just increase, it ballooned by trillions of dollars. We're talking about sums so large they're almost abstract.
It's hard to even picture. If we connect this to the bigger picture, during those pandemic years, the average increase in a billionaire's wealth was around $2.7 billion per day. Per day. To really let that sink in, while many people experience stagnant wages or even job losses and, a rising cost of living, unimaginable wealth was being generated at the very top.
And it's not a completely separate phenomenon, is it? Many of these billionaires have significant ownership stakes in the very companies that have been increasing prices.
That's a key connection.
So, in a way, their wealth growth is partly fueled by those higher costs that we're all experiencing.
Absolutely.
So while we're seeing these extra charges at the till, it's worth remembering who benefits most from these increased profits, often the very wealthy individuals who own significant stakes in these corporations, which leads us directly to the staggering growth in billionaire wealth.
Precisely. And the projections for the future are even more striking. Oxfam indicates that we could see the first trillionaires within the next decade.
A trillionaire.
Yeah, specifically mentioning Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Larry Ellison, Mark Zuckerberg, and Bernard Arnault as being on that trajectory.
Trillionaire.
Yep.
It's a number that's almost beyond comprehension. The Cold Fusion material offered a really powerful way to think about this.
Yeah, that analogy was good.
If you earned $1 every single second, it would take you about 12 days to become a millionaire, less than 2 weeks.
Okay, manageable.
But to reach $1 billion at that same rate, you'd be working for over 31 years nonstop.
31 years, okay.
Now consider that the combined wealth of all the billionaires in the world jumped from $13 trillion to to $15 trillion in just 2024.
Just 1 year.
To put that in perspective, that's roughly the entire GDP of a country like Italy.
Wow.
Being created just in the increased wealth of billionaires in a single year.
And if we drill down further, the top 10 richest men saw their fortunes grow by an average of $100 million per day.
$100 million a day.
That's more than entire communities might earn in a lifetime. It truly highlights the immense scale of wealth accumulation and the just astonishing speed at which it's happening.
It's been described as a sort of wealth vacuum at the top. The wealthiest 1% has captured a massive 38% of all new wealth created since 1995.
38%.
At the same time, the poorest half of the world's population, that's around, 3.8 billion people, owns just about 2% of the total global wealth.
2%. The level of disparity is just staggering.
Yeah.
This leads us to Oxfam's argument that a significant portion of this billionaire wealth, they estimate around 60%, isn't solely the result of innovative entrepreneurship and hard work. Their report, Takers Not Makers, suggests it's largely taken, not earned, pointing to factors like inheritance, what they term cronyism or corruption, and the power of monopolies.
Inheritance plays a huge role, doesn't it? It's contributing to what's being called a new aristocratic oligarchy.
Seems like it.
Interestingly, in 2023, for the first time, more new billionaires became rich through inheriting wealth than by starting their own businesses.
That's a major shift.
They get this, every single billionaire under the age of 30 inherited their fortune.
Every single one. Wow. And the sheer amount of wealth being passed down is mind-boggling. Over the next 3 decades, it's estimated that more than $5.2 trillion will be transferred from today's billionaires to their heirs.
$5.2 trillion.
And what's particularly noteworthy is that a significant portion of this will likely be untaxed.
That's right. Many countries don't have inheritance taxes for direct descendants. And remarkably, half of the world's billionaires reside in countries with no such tax at all.
Half of them. So that means that substantial resources that could potentially fund public services.
Like schools, hospitals?
Exactly. They're just not being collected by governments.
Okay.
Then we have the issue of monopoly power, where dominant corporations essentially control their respective markets,
Right.
allowing them to set prices and consequently significantly increase the wealth of their leaders. Oxfam estimates that around 18% of global millionaire wealth originates from this kind of market dominance.
18%. So we're talking about companies that have an overwhelming share of their markets. Think about someone like Jeff Bezos with Amazon.
The obvious example, yeah.
Which reportedly accounts for a huge percentage of online purchases in many European countries.
Mm-hmm.
Or Aliko Dangote, who has a near monopoly on cement in Nigeria, giving him substantial economic and, well, potentially political influence.
And this concentration of market power isn't just about economics. It can also translate into political sway. One of our sources touches on the idea of a political system that might favor the interests of billionaires, citing examples like the idea of a president of and for billionaires in the U.S., and even Elon Musk's public support for Donald Trump. The sheer concentration of wealth can lead to a similar concentration of power.
It's also important to consider the link between this extreme wealth and its impact on the environment.
Oh, definitely.
Oxfam's research found that just 125 of the richest billionaires are responsible for an average of 3 million carbon tons of emissions each year.
3 million tons each.
Each year, yeah, through their investments in polluting industries. That's an astonishing individual contribution compared to, the average person.
It really puts things into perspective. Beyond the economic and political dimensions, the concentration of such immense wealth also has significant implications for other critical global issues, like climate change, as our sources highlight.
Right.
Now, let's explore some of the sophisticated strategies that the wealthy often employ to grow and maintain their fortunes while minimizing their tax obligations.
Right.
The buy, borrow, die technique is a really clear illustration of this.
Okay, so how exactly does this buy, borrow, die strategy work in practice? Walk us through it.
Okay, so essentially, the wealthy tend to accumulate their wealth in assets that appreciate in value over time, like stocks.
Right, makes sense.
The crucial thing to remember is that these assets are generally not taxed until they're actually sold. That's the buy and hold part.
Got it. No sale, no tax yet.
Exactly. Then comes the borrow part. Instead of selling these assets and triggering a taxable event, they can borrow against the value of these assets to fund their lifestyles.
Oh, okay.
Purchasing luxury goods like yachts and mansions, for example, these loans are not considered taxable income.
So they can live very comfortably without technically earning a taxable income in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating loophole.
Precisely. The examples involving Larry Ellison are often cited reports of a massive yacht, an expensive mansion, even purchasing an entire Hawaiian island.
Right. Well,
all allegedly financed by borrowing against his substantial holdings of Oracle stock. And the final step, die, refers to the passing on of these assets to their heirs. Often, due to sophisticated legal structures like trust accounts, the amount of inheritance tax due is minimal.
So the tax man doesn't get much of a look in.
Not as much as you might think. And critically, the increase in the asset's value during the original owner's lifetime often escapes taxation altogether at the time of death. It gets what's called a step up in basis.
It sounds like a pretty significant advantage, doesn't it? One of our sources even pointed out that the wealthiest 25 people in the U.S. paid an effective tax rate of only 3.4%.
3.4%. That's considerably lower than what many regular working individuals pay out of their salaries, often through pay-AE or similar systems.
Yeah, much lower.
Circling back to the influence of monopoly power, it's really important to understand the broader consequences. As we discussed, it accounts for a substantial portion of billionaire wealth.
That 18% figure.
Yeah, and its effects extend throughout the entire economy.
It's not just about a few individuals becoming incredibly rich, is it? When dominant companies control a market, it can stifle competition.
Definitely.
Potentially leading to less innovation and fewer choices for consumers. They also gain significant leverage over pricing and can even influence wage levels.
Exactly. We see examples of this in various sectors. The dominance of Amazon in online retail, Google's control over search engine market share, Meta's platforms and social media.
Right.
And as we mentioned, Aliko Dangote's cement business in Nigeria. There have even been allegations of crony capitalism and monopolistic practices against groups like the Adani Group.
Now, the concept of the Cantillon effect came up in our research. Could you explain that in a way that's, easy to understand?
Sure. The Cantillon effect essentially describes how new money that's injected into the economy doesn't spread out evenly and immediately to everyone. Instead, those who are closest to the source of this new money, typically the wealthy individuals and large corporations, are the first to benefit. They receive it through things like government contracts, central bank policies, their relationships with financial institutions.
So they get first dibs, basically.
Pretty much. They can use this new money to buy assets like stocks and real estate before the general price level has a chance to rise significantly.
I see.
Meanwhile, regular people see the prices of goods and services go up before their wages or savings can keep pace. It's like pouring water into a tiered fountain. The top levels overflow first.
Okay, so they get the first opportunity to benefit from this new money before inflation kicks in for everyone else. That makes sense.
Precisely. And this connects to the government stimulus measures we saw during the pandemic, while the intention was, to provide economic support to people.
Yeah, the stimulus checks and all that.
These measures also contributed to inflation in asset prices. Those who already held significant assets, like the wealthy, saw the value of their investments increase considerably.
Because they own the stocks and property already.
Exactly. By 2022, the wealthiest 10% in the U.S. owned a staggering 93% of all stock market equity.
Right, 93%.
So the injection of liquidity into the economy disproportionately benefited those at the top.
There was a really powerful quote from Gary Stevenson that our sources highlighted. Money is not food. Money is not energy. Money is not housing. Money is not healthcare.
Yeah.
It really brings the abstract concept of money down to the tangible realities of life.
It underscores a really fundamental point.
Right.
Simply giving everyone more money doesn't magically create more actual resources in society.
Right. You can't print food.
Exactly. In fact, if it's not managed carefully, it can lead to inflation, potentially making inequality even worse if the distribution of that new money isn't equitable.
So with all of this in mind, it's clear why there's growing frustration and increasing calls for change. What are some of the potential solutions that are being discussed to address this wealth disparity?
Wow.
And what are some of the inherent challenges in implementing them?
Progressive taxation of the ultra-wealthy is a commonly proposed solution. The idea being that a larger percentage of their substantial income and wealth could be used to fund public services and reduce inequality.
Makes sense on the surface.
However, one potential challenge often raised is the possibility of wealthy individuals and corporations relocating to countries with lower tax rates. Capital flight, essentially.
Right, the argument that they'll just leave. We also came across Milton Friedman's arguments against a 100% inheritance tax, suggesting that it could remove the incentive for an investment and the creation of wealth-generating assets like factories and new technologies. Why build it if you can't pass it on?
That's the counter-argument, yes. Another approach involves tightening existing financial regulations and closing loopholes.
Like what specifically?
Things like those related to stock buybacks, which economic Lenore Palladino has criticized for prioritizing shareholder profits over worker wages, and the use of offshore tax havens. The aim here is simply to ensure that the wealthiest contribute a fairer share of taxes based on the existing rules, let alone new ones.
Of course, you often hear the counter-argument that it's their hard-earned money and they should be entitled to it.
Sure.
But the focus in these discussions often revolves around ensuring a more equitable system and a level playing field rather than necessarily, punishing financial success.
Right. It's about the fairness of the system itself. Raising the minimum wage is another frequently debated policy aimed at helping those with lower incomes cope with rising living costs.
Always a hot topic.
But again, there are also concerns raised about potential negative impacts on employment rates, businesses cutting jobs, and the possibility of contributing to inflation.
It's complex. Gary Stevenson also made an important point about the significant power and influence that the very wealthy often wield.
Yeah. Politically and economically.
Which can make it challenging to implement policies that might redistribute wealth. He emphasized that broader public understanding and support are crucial for addressing deeply entrenched inequality.
We even saw a listener comment that raised the question of whether billionaires creating jobs justifies their level of wealth.
That's a common defense, isn't it?
It is. And while job creation is undoubtedly a positive contribution, the counterargument is that a significant portion of the recent wealth accumulation isn't through traditional business building and job creation.
Right, not like the old industrialists necessarily.
But rather through investments, particularly in the stock market and the strategic use of debt and those financial mechanisms we talked about.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it seems the central tension is this. While the cost of basic necessities continues to rise for a large portion of the population, you feel it, I feel it, the wealth at the very top is expanding at an extraordinary rate. And this isn't happening randomly. It's the result of a complex interplay of factors.
Yeah, a whole mix.
It's including corporate profit strategies, the massive transfer of wealth through inheritance, the dominance of certain companies in the market, and sophisticated financial mechanisms that often minimize tax burdens.
And it's so important to understand that this isn't just like an inevitable feature of the world. These are outcomes shaped by the choices we make within our economic system.
Policies, regulations.
Exactly. The policies we enact, the regulations we enforce, and even the cultural norms we accept all play a role.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given everything we've discussed today, the increasing cost of living, the explosion of billionaire wealth, the role of corporate profits, the impact of inheritance, the power of monopolies, and the various potential solutions and their challenges, what single change do you believe would have the most significant impact on addressing this growing wealth disparity?
That's a tough one.
And what do you think would be the biggest obstacles in actually bringing that change about? We encourage you to really think about the different perspectives we've explored in this deep dive.